all of a sudden there's this whistle, and this whistle goes, and it's I won't do it now, but it's a two-tone whistle, and it sounds something out of horror movies. It truly is, makes your hairs on the back of your neck stand up. And the guys' faces, they all pause, and they all look at me and look behind, because it's coming from just on my right behind me, and their color completely drains out of their faces, and they look shell-shocked. And I'm like, what was that whistle? And then one of them goes, Bushmaster.
And it's interesting what you say about, going through this kind of emotional turmoil, as well as obviously the kind of physical issues, but then coming to the conclusion that it's not going to help me to think about these things, kind of worrying about people back home, worrying about what have I got myself into. None of this is going to get me out of the situation. I just need to break it down into kind of incremental steps that I can take to get out of it. And it's kind of, you must learn an incredible amount about yourself, about expeditions, about kind of, just generally how to overcome challenges when you're put in that, particularly deadly situation.
Yeah, 100%. After Mongolia, that's when I realized that not only for myself, but people in general are so more capable than they give themselves credit for. The amount of fear and doubt that I had with Mongolia.
And I mean, it must leave you in such awe of these Bushmen, the fact that they are so knowledgeable about the jungle, about it, the risks that it presents, but, also the opportunities for food, for safety, if you kind of treat it the right way.
Absolutely. No, their knowledge, they're funny because it's so normal for them. So you have to really, it's like getting blood out of a stone. You have to really say, what are you doing there? What's that? And then they're picking something. Oh, I'm actually going to use this to stun the fish so I can pick them up without killing them. Or I'm using this because this will be nice when eating later or something. So you really have to just pay attention to what they're doing and ask the questions.
Of course, when you're traveling, a certain amount of tiredness, maybe you're suffering from jet lag, maybe you stayed up late the night before, whatever it is, physical fatigue, it's not that unusual, and it wouldn't automatically set off alarm bells of, something is seriously wrong here. But it seemed that he then kind of went from that to, he requires immediate medical attention in a very short space of time.
Yeah, and I think, he was getting worse during the day, but I think he was shrugging it off, and therefore I was. And I think, we had a tour guide with us, and he told me in the evening he was keeping an eye on him. I just didn't know that he was. And I think it was just the doctors sort of going, like, "Are you okay, Chris?" And he was like, "Fine." They were like, "No, you're not."
I suppose what surprised me, kind of when you were telling this story, was how suddenly, it came about, how suddenly you were aware that there was a problem. If the camel was up to its chest, seemingly, instantaneously, I suppose the image in my head from having watched, whatever 80s television shows with quicksand is, it's quite a sort of slow process, and you slowly sink into it. But it sounds almost like kind of, falling into water by the way you've described it.
That's exactly what it was like. It's almost like I guess, like, I don't know if you've ever just put your foot in a pothole and you think you're just going to go down like a quarter of an inch, and you go up to your knee. It was the camel went straight in. There was no sudden, oh, it's a bit gloopy. Actually, at that place we were at, the sand was actually slightly firmer than it had been earlier.
When you're talking about, sort of anxiety or trepidation before a jump, how much do you think that is an impediment, and how much do you think it's actually a necessary part of making sure you are vigilant and you're doing all of your checks? I'm quite interested in the psychology of how helpful fear is really doing something as risky as base jumping.
So there's definitely a scale. And when you get past a certain point on that, and you're too scared, you're too frightened, you know, your heartbeat is racing 1,000,000 miles an hour, you're sweating, your mind is all over the place. That's the point where you shouldn't be there. You know, as you say, a healthy amount, perfect, because it doesn't give you complacency. You know, you're at the exit point, you're like, you know the consequences. If I mess up here, I could die, you know, I could hurt myself, I could, you know, something serious could happen. That's a healthy amount of fear. You know the amount of risk that you're taking.
How was this organized? What kind of prep went in to this expedition beforehand? How were you able to get in contact with, you know, people in the various countries that you passed through in order to ensure your safety?
Yes, that's a very good question, because, you know, one of the things that worked really well was that I'd connected with Australian resource companies who had interests in Africa and on my route. And so some of them were small sponsors, but the really key thing for security was that they were already really well engaged with the governments of those regions. They had their Mr. Fix-It people who could, you know, help make getting visas and things securely. We could always get advice about security up ahead and where the dangerous spots were. And then often they'd actually work out, okay, therefore you need the security here. So that would actually help with the security.
What about then, you know, the kind of the processes they would have there for dealing with a foreign film crew? You know, were you were given any type of legal representation? Were you allowed to call either the embassy or your family or the producers or whoever?
No, no one knew where we were. So the only way we could get a message through was there was a World Food Program next door. So we asked them, so can we use your phone actually calling our families? My wife was pregnant those days with my sort of baby. And I was shocked that they don't allow us to actually get a message through, or, you know, calling British authorities or insurers or, you know, the support crew back in London. And for the first 2 days, we were declined any form of communication with sort of outside world. Finally, day 3, they allowed us to go to the United Nations compound and make phone calls.